Elizabeth Hack here. I wanted to finish up the lecture on the visual language, and I wanted to go back to the slide on value, kind of rush through that one. The effects and relationships of light and dark. First of all, we have value that comes from a light source. This is what artists who are portraying the realistic world use. They imagine or create a light source on a scene, and then they light it up. Where the sun hits first, or the light hits first, is lightest, and as it moves away from the light, we have the darker values, the darker darks. So we have light, medium, and dark tones. And then another type of value, we have arbitrary value. That's used as a design element without reference to 3D form, as in a checkerboard. And we also use the term grayscale, which is a strip of gradated values, tints, neutrals, and shades. So the tints are the lightest, and a tint is a color mixed with white, and a shade, a color mixed with black, or with its complement to tone it down. Neutrals are somewhere in between. So this painting by Daumier, it's actually not a painting, I think it's Daumier. This is an image of a family that was slaughtered, and you can see, you have the full range of color, but just in dark and light. You can see the very inky blacks of the shadows and the blood, the poor little child under her father's body, etc., etc. Arbitrary value. Contemporary modern artists often use this in their images where there are no representational forms. We have pockets of black, pockets of white in this picture, and interspersed with the color. And here we have just a whole painting based on dark and light. You use dark and light to create form in a painting. So form is actually a three-dimensional object itself, or a simulation of a 3D object. This is a sculpture, this is a painting. Basically the same subject, a woman with her mouth open, neck kind of protruding here a little bit. And you can see how the artist used darks and lights to make this form come to life. And this, of course, is a sculpture made out of bronze, and the light is hitting it, creating darks and lights in the real world. This is how an artist might use tints and shades, tints, tones, and shades to create a work of art. This is called The Last Drop. It's a morality painting in which two fellows are having a whole lot of fun drinking and smoking. And you can see he's emptying out his beer stein, he's raising a pipe, he's emptying out a wine jug. And the artist just used the color red, basically, maybe a little ochre, maybe a little burnt umber, black and white, to create this full range of tones to tell the story. So our eyes come down through the shaft of light, the colorful body, goes up the legs to the face that's lit up. And then we start to see what's really important about the painting, the tonal, kind of neutral skeleton, who is holding up an hourglass, telling these fellows that time is short, time is running out. Don't waste your time drinking and smoking. Do something productive. Space. Okay, this is the last element of art that we perceive in works of art. A last component of the visual language that we will discuss. Like color, it's very complicated. There are many aspects to it. We'll just touch on a few of them. But remember that space refers to the three-dimensional depth in a work of art, and refers to background, foreground relationship. So foreground is this fellow here, background is the flat wall behind him. We have different ways. We'll go through each of these: linear, perspective, atmospheric, overlapping, positive, negative, space, figure, ground relationships. Once again, this is a wonderful painting that tells the story. Here's a very fancy fellow with a velvet cap and an ostrich plume, and it's pointing to what he will become someday. Linear perspective is a mathematical system that was devised in the Renaissance to create the illusion of depth on a two-dimensional plane. Now the eye perceives depth as parallel lines receding into space, and this is something that you can learn if you don't already know it, and teach your students. It's a delight to them when they learn. With the supposition that all parallel lines recede to a vanishing point on the horizon line. As you can see, it's a very mathematical system of measurement. Atmospheric perspective is creating the illusion of depth by trying to portray the difference in atmosphere. As you know, when we look out, things far away seem hazier, especially if there's fog or smog involved. Things in the distance are less bright. Okay, we know these mountains are probably green with rocks, but they just look a neutral tan in the distance. And here the artist Monet is diffusing the atmosphere on the cathedral to show it diminishing, the form diminishing in the sunlight. This is a painting, very fabulously realistic painting of using atmospheric perspective. Right? The hills are not purple, actually. They're just dirt and rock and trees, but in the distance they are violet. Overlapping is another means by which you can portray three-dimensional space. You simply put objects in front of one another, and the ones in the very back seem to be further back in the distance, and the ones further forward are in the foreground. So a simple way to show shape. You don't even have to use a value in modeling. It will still work if these are as flat as pancakes. Overlapping. This is a really nice close-up of this beautiful Manet painting. You can see what's in the front, this vase of flowers, then the wine bottle, then the compote with the fruit, and then they're in front of her arm. Positive and negative space, you must be keenly aware of these when you're trying to perceive and analyze pictures. What is going on in the foreground? What is going on in the background? And the objects that we perceive in the foreground, that's called the positive space. The negative space is the background, no less important. It supports the foreground, it supports the positive space. You can look at them as puzzle pieces, all perfectly interlocked to create this wonderful thing we call composition and art. This is another term that is used when talking about space, figure ground. It's a figure standing in front of a ground or on a ground. Figure ground relationship. What is the relationship of this to this? Just another term for discussion. Very different paintings. And we'll stop with this beautifully composed painting by Vermeer, Woman Reading a Letter. Tells a wonderful story. You can see his just very simple use of color, yellow or gold, and this beautiful silvery blue. He's rendered this a very real world with the elements of art: line, shape, color, texture, value, form, and space, to create a sense of mystery, intrigue, subtlety, and beauty. So that concludes the lecture on the visual language. Stay tuned for another lecture on how you can teach certain elements of art to your students using works of art. Thank you.